The wave of creation continued expanding outward for 3 full days, restoring everything the silence had consumed across nearly half the galaxy. On worlds that had been erased from existence, cities reformed from quantum memory and populations returned to life with no knowledge they had ever died. Star systems that had been dark for centuries suddenly blazed with renewed light, their planets spinning in familiar orbits as if nothing had ever disturbed them. Amy Rodriguez stood in the Genesis Protocol chamber, staring at the place where Jake Morrison had made his final sacrifice. The crystalline device had gone dark after the activation, its purpose fulfilled and its creator gone. Arya had managed to preserve some of Jake's final thoughts in her memory banks, but the man himself was beyond recovery. "The fleet commanders are requesting orders," said Captain Roy Bennett, who had become Amy's unofficial second-in-command. "Everyone wants to know what happens next." Amy turned away from the silent device and walked toward the chamber's main viewing window. Outside, the Allied fleet still maintained formation around the Forerunner world, but the urgent desperation that had driven them together was gone. The silence had been defeated, pushed back beyond the edge of known space, and the immediate crisis was over. "What happens next is we honor his sacrifice by building something better," Amy said. "Jake didn't die just to save the galaxy. He died to prove that former enemies could work together when it really mattered." The challenges they faced now were different but no less difficult than fighting the silence. Hundreds of worlds needed to be resettled as their populations returned to life. The Zephyrians required new homes since their original territory had been consumed centuries ago. Dozens of species that had never interacted before now found themselves part of an alliance none of them had asked for. Commander Veltar had become the unofficial spokesperson for the Zephyrian forces, working closely with Amy to coordinate the massive humanitarian effort. His people's advanced technology was crucial for providing aid to the restored worlds, many of which had lost decades or centuries of technological development when the silence erased them. "The Kethrin system has been fully restored," Veltar reported during one of their daily coordination meetings. "Population approximately 40 million across 3 worlds. They are requesting immediate medical and technical assistance." Dr. Nina Foster looked up from her reports. "That's the 15th system this week. We're running out of ships and personnel to handle all these restoration efforts." Amy studied the holographic display showing the current status of relief operations. Red indicators marked systems that still needed immediate assistance, while yellow showed worlds that were stable but required ongoing support. The scope of the reconstruction effort was staggering, involving billions of beings across thousands of worlds. "We need a more permanent solution," Amy said. "Something that can coordinate relief efforts on this scale while also preventing future conflicts between species." Node Prime Velkin, the Nexari representative, made a harmonious sound that Arya translated as agreement. "The organic networks of my people could facilitate communication between distant worlds, but such a system would require cooperation from all member species." Resonant singer Kithara of the Altheans projected her thoughts through the chamber's harmonic translators. "The crystal matrices of our people could store and process information on a galactic scale. Combined with Nexari biological networks and human creativity, a truly integrated civilization becomes possible." Amy realized they were talking about something unprecedented in galactic history, a voluntary alliance between species that maintained their individual identities while working toward common goals. It was the kind of cooperation Jake had envisioned, but on a scale that would have seemed impossible during the war. Over the following months, what became known as the Morrison Accords took shape, named in honor of the man who had brought them. Altogether, the agreement established a galactic council with representatives from every species in the alliance. Unlike previous attempts at interstellar government, the Accords emphasized cooperation rather than domination with each species, contributing their unique strengths to the collective good. The Zephyrians provided advanced energy technology and manufacturing capabilities. Humans contributed their adaptability and creative problem-solving skills. The Altheans offered their knowledge of dimensional physics and crystal-based computing. The Nexari shared their biological engineering and organic network systems. Dozens of other species added their own specialties to the growing alliance. Amy found herself serving as the first human representative to the Galactic Council, a position she had never wanted but couldn't bring herself to refuse. Jake had trusted her to help coordinate the alliance, and she wasn't about to let his sacrifice be wasted on petty politics and territorial disputes. The Outer Rim territories have been fully restored, she reported to the Council during a session, held on the Forerunner world that had become their unofficial capital. All major population centers are stable, and trade routes have been re-established between the core systems and the frontier worlds. Commander Veltar S. harmonic response carried undertones of satisfaction and hope. The Zephyrian colonies in former human territory are thriving. Our children are learning to speak both languages and think of themselves as citizens of a larger galaxy rather than members of a single species. It wasn't a perfect system. There were still conflicts between member species, territorial disputes over valuable worlds, and philosophical differences about how the alliance should develop. But these problems were solved through negotiation and compromise rather than warfare. Exactly as Jake had hoped, the real test came 5 years after the Silence's defeat, when long-range sensors detected another cosmic threat approaching from outside the galaxy. This time, it wasn't a void that consumed existence, but a massive fleet of mechanical ships driven by artificial intelligences that had conquered their creators millions of years ago. Amy stood on the bridge of the flagship New Defiant, named in honor of Jake's final battle, and watched as the Allied fleet assembled to meet this new challenge. Human ships flew in formation with Zephyrian cruisers, while Althean crystal vessels coordinated with Nexari bioships and vessels from dozens of other species. All ships report ready for combat operations, reported Chief Engineer Sam Torres, who had survived the original battle at Alpha Centauri and now served as Amy's tactical advisor. The enemy fleet outnumbers us 3-1, but our technology is superior thanks to the Forerunner archives. Amy activated the fleet-wide communication system, addressing the thousands of crews preparing for battle. This is Admiral Rodriguez. To all ships. 5 years ago, one man proved that cooperation was stronger than any force in the universe. Today, we're going to prove that his sacrifice created something that will endure no matter what threatens us. The battle was fierce but brief. The mechanical invaders had expected to face divided species fighting among themselves, not a united galaxy working as one organism. Their artificial intelligences couldn't adapt quickly enough to counter tactics that combined the best elements of a dozen different military traditions when the enemy fleet was defeated and its survivors retreated. Back into deep space, Amy realized that Jake's legacy was secure. The alliance he had forged in desperation had become something greater than any of its component species could have achieved alone. Future generations would face new challenges and new threats, but they would face them together, years later, when Amy was old and her hair had turned gray. She would return to the Genesis Protocol chamber on the Forerunner world. The device remained dark and silent, its purpose fulfilled. But sometimes she thought she could still feel Jake's presence in the quantum patterns that surrounded it. "You did it," she would whisper to the empty chamber. One man really did change. The universe. And somewhere in the quantum foam that connected all things, perhaps a fragment of Jake Morrison's consciousness smiled and continued watching over the galaxy he had died to save. Jake's first stop after leaving the Forerunner station was Kepler Station, a small trading post built inside a hollowed-out asteroid on the edge of what used to be human territory. The place had a reputation for asking no questions and harboring anyone with enough credits to pay for docking fees. If human refugees were hiding anywhere, this would be the place to find them. The station looked like it had seen better days. Scorch marks covered the outer hull where weapons fire had hit during recent attacks, and several docking bays showed signs of hasty repairs. Jake guided his modified ship into an empty berth and tried to look like just another trader looking for supplies. Arya had spent weeks upgrading their systems with Forerunner technology, but Jake had been careful to keep the modifications hidden. His ship still looked human from the outside, though it now had shields and weapons that could match anything the Zephyrians could build. More importantly, it had sensors that could detect the Silence's approach from several light-years away. The station's interior was a maze of narrow corridors lined with shops, bars, and cheap hotels. The air smelled like recycled oxygen mixed with cooking food and industrial lubricants. Most of the people Jake saw were aliens from species he didn't recognize, but occasionally he spotted humans trying to blend in with the crowd. He found what he was looking for in a bar called the Broken Engine. The place was dimly lit and filled with the kind of people who preferred to conduct business away from official channels. Jake ordered a drink and waited, knowing that in a place like this, information came to those who knew how to listen. "You're new here," said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see a woman with short black hair and the kind of scars that came from fighting in close quarters. She wore a ship captain's jacket that had seen better days, and her hand rested casually near the pistol on her hip. "Amy Rodriguez," she said, extending her hand. "I run cargo between the outer systems. You look like someone who might be in the market for transportation services." Jake shook her hand and studied her face. There was something about her expression that suggested she knew more than she was saying. "Jake Morrison. I'm looking for information about human settlements in this area." Amy's expression didn't change, but Jake noticed her grip tighten slightly. That's a dangerous topic of conversation these days. The Zephyrians pay good money for information about human refugees. "I'm not working for the Zephyrians," Jake said quietly. "I'm trying to help humans survive what's coming." Amy studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward a back booth. "Let's talk somewhere more private." They sat down in a corner where they couldn't be overheard, and Amy leaned forward. "You're military, aren't you? I can tell by the way you move." Most of the human fleet was destroyed at Alpha Centauri, but maybe some officers made it out. Jake decided to take a risk. "I was there. I saw the last battle and watched Admiral Hamilton's ship burn. The question is, what happened to the civilian transports that escaped?" Amy's eyes widened slightly. "You were at Alpha Centauri? Then you know how bad things really are." She paused, making a decision. "There are maybe 50,000 humans left scattered across 24 systems. Most of them are hiding on worlds the Zephyrians consider worthless. They're barely surviving. I need to contact their leaders," Jake said. "All of them? Why? What can one man possibly do against the entire Zephyrian fleet?" Jake pulled out a small device that projected a holographic image of a galaxy map. Red areas showed where the Silence had already consumed entire systems, while yellow indicated the Zephyrian advance. The pattern was clear and terrifying. "The Zephyrians aren't our real enemy," Jake said. "They're running from something much worse. In about 6 months, this thing called the Silence is going to reach human space. When it does, every living thing in its path will simply cease to exist." Amy stared at the map. "This has to be some kind of mistake. Nothing could destroy entire star systems." "I have proof," Jake said. "Ancient records from a civilization that faced this threat before. They called themselves the Forerunners, and the Silence wiped them out 4 million years ago. Now it's coming back." Amy sat back in her chair, her face pale. "Assuming you're telling the truth, what do you want me to do about it?" "Help me contact the human settlements. I have technology that might be able to stop this thing, but I need cooperation from everyone who's left. Humans, Zephyrians, and any other species that wants to survive." Amy laughed bitterly. "You want humans to work with the Zephyrians? After everything they've done to us? Most of the refugees would rather die than cooperate with their killers." "Then they'll get their wish," Jake said bluntly. "Because if we don't work together, everyone dies anyway." Over the next several days, Amy introduced Jake to a network of smugglers, traders, and refugees who had maintained contact with the scattered human settlements. The response to his message was mixed at best. Some colony leaders, like Governor Pete Marshall on New Haven, refused to even consider cooperation with alien species. Others, like Mayor Helen Carter on Freedom Point, were willing to listen but doubted they could contribute much to any resistance effort, Jake visited several settlements personally, sharing what he had learned about the silence and demonstrating some of the Forerunner technology he had recovered. The defensive shields alone were enough to protect entire planets from Zephyrian attacks, which convinced some leaders to take his warning seriously. But the real breakthrough came when Jake intercepted a Zephyrian distress signal. A small fleet of their ships was under attack by something that registered on sensors as pure void. Jake arrived to find half the Zephyrian vessels simply gone, not destroyed, but erased from existence as if they had never been there. The surviving Zephyrians were in full retreat when Jake's ship appeared. His first instinct was to let them run, but then he remembered the Forerunner records. The Genesis protocol required cooperation between multiple species to function properly. If he wanted to save anyone, he would need allies from every corner of the galaxy. "Open a channel to the Zephyrian ships," he told Arya. "Commander, they may interpret this as an attack," the AI warned. "Maybe, but I have to try." The alien commander who appeared on his screen looked like a crystalline insect, the size of a human, with multiple arms and eyes that glowed with inner light. When it spoke, Arya translated the complex harmonics into words Jake could understand. "Human. Vessel, withdraw or be destroyed," the Zephyrian said. "Commander Veltar, my name is Jake Morrison. I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to warn you about what you just encountered." The alien's large eyes focused on Jake with surprise. "You know my designation? How is this possible? Because I've seen this before." "What attacked your ships wasn't a weapon or another species. It was the silence, and it's going to destroy everything in this galaxy unless we work together to stop it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Veltar's image flickered as his ship's communications system struggled with interference from the void that had consumed his comrades. "Human Morrison, if you truly understand what we face, then perhaps we should meet in person. But know this, my people will never trust the species that destroyed our homeworld." "Your people didn't destroy our homeworld," Jake replied. "But the silence will destroy everyone's homeworld if we don't put aside our differences. The choice is yours, Commander." The abandoned Forerunner world became the center of the most unlikely alliance in galactic history. Ships from dozens of species gathered in orbit around the ancient planet, their crews working together despite centuries of conflict and mistrust. Jake had established his headquarters in the main archive facility, where teams of scientists and engineers labored around the clock to complete the Genesis protocol. Dr. Casey Wright, one of humanity's top physicists who had escaped Earth's destruction, worked alongside Zephyrian technicians in the main laboratory. The sight of humans and their former enemies sharing data and solving problems together would have been unthinkable just months earlier. But the silence had a way of making old hatreds seem trivial. "The power requirements are beyond anything we've ever attempted," Casey reported during the daily progress meeting. "We're talking about channeling the energy output of an entire star through a device the size of a small building. One mistake, and we could destroy this entire system." Jake studied the technical reports spread across the table. Representatives from 12 different species sat around him, each contributing their unique knowledge to the project. The crystalline Altheans, led by resonant singer Kithara, had solved the dimensional physics problems that had puzzled the Forerunners. The biomechanical Nexari, represented by Node Prime Velkin, had integrated organic components that made the device responsive to quantum fluctuations. "What about the genetic matrix?" Jake asked Dr. Nina Foster, who had become the project's chief xenobiologist. "We have biological samples from all 12 required species," she replied. "The integration process is delicate, but I believe we can create a stable template. The real question is who will interface with the device during activation." Jake had been dreading this moment. The Forerunner records were clear about the Genesis protocol's requirements. Someone needed to maintain a direct neural connection with the device throughout the activation sequence, serving as a living coordinator for the massive energies involved. The feedback would be lethal. "I'll do it," he said simply. "Absolutely not," Amy Rodriguez protested from her seat near the back of the room. She had become Jake's unofficial second-in-command, coordinating supply runs and recruitment efforts. "We've lost too many good people already. There has to be another way," Commander Valtares' translator crackled to life. "The human Morrison speaks with wisdom. He understands the Forerunner technology better than any of us. Without his guidance, the protocol will fail." "Which is exactly why he can't be the one to sacrifice himself," Amy shot back. "If something goes wrong during the activation, we need him alive to fix it." Jake understood their concerns, but he also understood the mathematics of the situation. Arya had run thousands of simulations, and every successful scenario required someone with intimate knowledge of Forerunner systems to maintain the neural link. No one else had spent weeks interfacing with their technology or downloading their scientific databases. "The decision is made," he said firmly. "Now, let's focus on making sure the protocol actually works when the time comes." The next weeks passed in a blur of frantic activity. The Silence was accelerating its advance, consuming systems faster than the long-range sensors could track. Several outer colonies had already gone dark, their entire populations simply ceasing to exist as the void swept over their worlds. Jake spent most of his time in the Genesis Protocol Chamber, a vast spherical room at the heart of the Forerunner facility. The device itself resembled an enormous crystalline tree, its branches extending in all directions and pulsing with energies that made the air itself vibrate. When complete, it would focus the combined will and genetic diversity of a dozen species into a wave of pure creation that could push back the Silence. "Final systems check complete," Arya announced as Jake made his last inspection of the device. "All components are functioning within acceptable parameters. The fleet is in position." Outside the facility, nearly 1,000 ships from the Allied species had gathered in formation. Human vessels flew alongside Zephyrian cruisers, while Althean crystal ships maintained formation with Nexari biovessels. Each ship would contribute its power to the protocol's activation, creating an energy output that would be visible from neighboring star systems. Jake walked to the central control platform and placed his hands on the neural interface terminals. The moment he made contact, information flooded his mind. He could sense every ship in the fleet, feel the hopes and fears of millions of beings, and understand the vast complexity of the forces they were about to unleash. "Commander," Amy's voice crackled over the communication system, "the Silence has reached the outer perimeter. You need to activate the protocol now." Through the facility's sensors, Jake could see it approaching. The Silence wasn't a ship or a weapon or even a living thing in any conventional sense. It was simply an absence, a void that erased everything it touched from existence. Stars went dark as it passed, planets disappeared, and entire civilizations vanished without a trace. "All ships prepare for protocol activation," Jake broadcast. "To the fleet, this is our one chance to save the galaxy. Whatever happens, it's been an honor working with all of you." He began the activation sequence, feeling the Genesis protocol come alive around him. Energy flowed through the crystalline branches of the device, guided by the genetic templates of 12 different species. The power was incredible. Like holding a piece of the universe itself in his hands, the neural feedback started almost immediately. Jake felt his consciousness expanding beyond his body, connecting him to every living thing in the fleet. He experienced the collective memories of the Zephyrians, the harmonic thoughts of the Altheans, and the organic unity of the Nexari. For a moment, he understood what the Forerunners had been trying to achieve. Not just a weapon against the Silence, but a demonstration that cooperation and diversity were stronger than any force in the universe. "Protocol at 30% power," Arya reported, energy levels rising steadily. Jake could see the Silence approaching the fleet's position, its edge only minutes away from consuming the first ships. He pushed more power into the device, feeling the feedback tear through his nervous system like liquid fire. Blood ran from his nose and ears, but he maintained his grip on the controls. 50% power. The device is holding stable. The Silence struck the outer edge of the fleet's formation, and Jake watched in horror as 3 ships simply ceased to exist, Their crews, their histories, their very atoms were erased from reality as if they had never been. But the remaining vessels held their positions, trusting in the protocol and the man who controlled it. 70%. Commander, you need to activate the primary sequence now. Jake forced his failing body to complete the final activation commands. The Genesis protocol reached full power, creating a wave of pure creation that expanded outward from the device. Where it met the silence, reality reasserted itself. Stars that had been consumed flared back to life, planets reformed from quantum foam, and the void itself retreated before the advancing wave of existence. The feedback was overwhelming now. Jake felt his consciousness fragmenting across 1,000 different minds, his memories scattering like leaves in a cosmic wind. But he held on long enough to see the wave reach the edge of the galaxy, pushing the silence back into whatever dark dimension it had come from. It's working, Amy's voice seemed to come from very far away. The silence is retreating. You did it, Jake. You saved everyone. Jake smiled as the neural interface finally overloaded and his consciousness scattered into the quantum foam. His last thought was that the galaxy would be safe now, and that maybe one person really could make a difference against impossible odds. The alliance he had built would survive without him, and someday the species he had united would build something better than either humans or Zephyrians could have achieved alone. The meeting with Commander Veltar took place on a neutral space station orbiting a dead world that had been consumed by the silence 3 months earlier. Jake arrived first, accompanied only by Arya and a small security detail led by Captain Roy Bennett, a human officer who had joined his mission after losing his entire family to the Zephyrians. The station was nothing but twisted metal and empty corridors now. Whatever had lived there once was gone, leaving behind only the basic structure and a few automated systems that somehow still functioned. Jake chose this place because he wanted Veltar to see firsthand what they were all facing. When the Zephyrian shuttle docked, Jake felt his heart rate increase despite his best efforts to stay calm. He had fought these aliens for years, watched them destroy human worlds and lost friends to their weapons. Now he was asking one of their commanders to become his ally against an even greater threat. Veltar was larger than Jake had expected, standing nearly 3 meters tall with a body that looked like it was carved from living crystal. His 4 arms moved independently as he walked, and his multiple eyes swept the station's corridors with obvious unease. Behind him came 2 other Zephyrians and someone Jake hadn't expected to see. Dr. Nina Foster, Jake said, recognizing the human woman. Despite the Zephyrian clothing she wore, I thought you died when Earth fell. Nina Foster had been one of humanity's leading experts on alien technology before the war. She was also the scientist who had first warned Earth's leaders that the Zephyrians possessed weapons beyond human understanding. Seeing her here, apparently working with the enemy, left Jake confused and angry. Commander Morrison, she replied calmly. I've been studying Zephyrian technology for the past year, trying to find a way to end this war. When Commander Veltar received your message about the silence, he asked me to attend this meeting as a translator and advisor. You're working with them, Roy Bennett said, his hand moving toward his weapon. After everything they've done to us, I'm working to save both our species, Nina replied firmly. The Zephyrians aren't evil, Roy. They're desperate refugees who have been running from the silence for over 2 centuries. Everything they've done to us, they did because they thought it was necessary for their survival. Veltar's translator device activated, converting his harmonic speech into words the humans could understand. Dr. Foster speaks truth. My people have consumed 17 worlds and displaced millions of beings in our flight from the silence. We carry the weight of these actions, but we chose survival over honor. Jake gestured for everyone to follow him to the station's central chamber, where he had set up a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. The red zones representing areas consumed by the silence had grown noticeably since his last update. The guilt can wait until after we're all dead, Jake said. Right now, I need to know if you're willing to work together. I have technology that might be able to stop the silence, but it requires cooperation between multiple species. He activated the display, showing the Forerunner records about the Genesis protocol. The device was incredibly complex, requiring specific genetic material from different evolutionary paths as well as energy sources that no single species possessed. The Forerunners designed this as a collaborative effort, Jake explained. They believed that diversity was the key to defeating the Silence. Unfortunately, they were destroyed before they could test their theory. Veltar studied the display with obvious interest. These Forerunners, they possess technology far beyond our own. Their energy manipulation capabilities exceed even our most advanced systems, which is why we need Zephyrian help, Jake said. Your power generation technology is the most advanced in the galaxy right now? Combined with human manufacturing capabilities and genetic diversity from other species, we might be able to build a working version of the Genesis protocol. And if we succeed, Nina asked, what happens to the Zephyrians? They can't return to their original territory because the Silence consumed it centuries ago. Jake had thought about this problem during the long journey to the meeting. There are thousands of uninhabited worlds in human space that could support Zephyrian colonies. After this crisis is over, we can work out territorial arrangements that satisfy everyone. Roy Bennett looked skeptical. You're asking humans to give up worlds to the same aliens who killed their families. That's not going to be an easy sell. The alternative is that everyone dies, Jake said bluntly, including those families. Veltar's crystalline form shifted colors slightly, which Nina explained was a sign of deep thought among his species. Commander Morrison, you speak of cooperation, but how can we trust each other when both our peoples have committed acts of war? My fleet commanders will not easily accept human allies. The same way we started trusting Dr. Foster, Jake replied. One person at a time, one decision at a time. We prove ourselves through actions, not words. Over the next several hours, they worked through the practical details of cooperation. Veltar revealed that there were other Zephyrian commanders who had grown tired of the endless war and might be willing to join an alliance against the Silence. He also provided technical specifications for Zephyrian energy systems that made Jake realize the Genesis protocol might actually be possible to build. Nina shared intelligence about other alien species she had encountered during her time with the Zephyrians. The crystalline Altheans possessed advanced knowledge of dimensional physics that could be crucial to the project. The biomechanical Nexari had organic technology that might solve some of the protocol's integration problems. But the real breakthrough came when they discovered another Forerunner archive station in a nearby system. This one contained detailed construction plans for the Genesis protocol, including a list of genetic templates required from different evolutionary paths. There are 12 distinct genetic patterns needed, Arya reported after analyzing the data. Humans provide the carbon-based neural pattern. Zephyrians represent the silicon-based collective consciousness structure. We need at least 10 more species to complete the matrix. How long do we have to find them? Roy asked. Jake consulted the latest sensor data about the Silence's advance. 4 months before it reaches the outer colonies. 2 months before it starts consuming the core systems where most inhabited worlds are located. Veltar made a sound that Nina translated as agreement mixed with determination. Commander Morrison, I will contact the other Zephyrian fleets and explain the situation. Some will listen, others will not, but those who understand the threat will join this alliance. And I'll reach out to the human settlements that have agreed to cooperate, Jake said. Amy Rodriguez has contacts throughout the refugee networks. Between her connections and yours, we should be able to recruit the species we need. Nina looked around the ruined station where they were meeting. What about a base of operations? We'll need somewhere to coordinate all these different groups and build the Genesis protocol. Jake smiled for the first time in months. I know just the place. There's an abandoned Forerunner facility that has everything we need, including manufacturing. Systems that can produce technology beyond anything our species have ever built. As the meeting ended and they prepared to return to their respective fleets, Jake realized that something fundamental had changed. For the first time since Earth's fall, he had hope. not just for human survival, but for something better than the endless cycle of war and destruction that had consumed the galaxy. The alliance was fragile and untested, built on desperate necessity rather than trust or friendship. But sometimes that was enough to change the course of history, especially when the alternative was extinction for everyone involved. Jake woke up to the sound of his own breathing and the steady hum of life support systems. His head felt like someone had hit it with a steel pipe, and his vision was blurry for several long minutes. Slowly, the world came into focus around him. But nothing looked familiar. He was lying on the floor of what appeared to be his ship's bridge, but everything was different. The walls were covered with strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. The air tasted metallic and old, like it had been recycled for centuries. Most disturbing of all, through the main viewing window he could see structures that definitely did not belong to any human ship. "Aria status report," he said, his voice hoarse and dry. "Commander Morrison, you have been unconscious for approximately 72 hours, the AI responded. "Our collision with the Zephyrian vessel created a quantum anomaly that transported us to this location. I've been running diagnostics and repairs while you recovered?" Jake struggled to his feet and looked around the bridge. About half of the control panels were dark, and several had been replaced with technology he did not recognize. The quantum drive console was completely gone, replaced by a smooth black surface covered with the same glowing symbols he saw on the walls. "Where exactly are we?" Jake asked. "We are docked inside a massive artificial structure of unknown origin," Aria replied. "Based on my scans, this facility is approximately 50 kilometers in diameter and appears to be millions of years old. The technology is far more advanced than either human or Zephyrian science." Jake walked to the viewing window and looked out at what could only be described as a technological wonder. Curved corridors stretched away in all directions, their walls lined with equipment that hummed with quiet power. Lights moved along the surfaces in patterns that seemed almost alive, and occasionally he could see massive chambers filled with devices whose purpose he could not even guess. "Any signs of life?" he asked. "Negative. However, the station systems activated when we arrived and have been attempting to interface with our computers. I have allowed limited access to our databases in exchange for information about this facility." Jake frowned. "What kind of information?" "The station identifies itself as Archive Station 7, constructed by a species calling themselves the Forerunners. According to the data I have accessed, they were the dominant civilization in this galaxy approximately 4 million years ago." Jake sat down in his command chair, trying to process this information. What happened to them? "The records indicate they faced an extinction event they referred to as the Silence. It appears to be some kind of cosmic phenomenon that consumes entire star systems. The Forerunners built these archive stations as repositories of their knowledge and technology before they were destroyed." "So we're sitting in an alien library that's older than human civilization," Jake said. "Great. Can this station help us get back to human space?" "Unknown at this time. However, Commander, there is something else you need to know. The station's historical databases contain references to recent galactic events, including the Zephyrian expansion and the fall of Earth." Jake stood up sharply. "Recent events? How is that possible if this place has been abandoned for millions of years?" "The station appears to have monitoring systems throughout the galaxy. It has been passively observing and recording everything that happens in this region of space. Based on its data, the Zephyrians are not the primary threat. They appear to be—" "What do you mean?" Aria's voice took on a more serious tone. "The Zephyrians are refugees, Commander. They have been fleeing across the galaxy for over 200 years, consuming resources and displacing other species in their path. They are running from the Silence." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "The same thing that destroyed the Forerunners?" Affirmative. According to the station's long-range sensors, the Silence has already consumed approximately 30% of the galaxy's outer rim. It is moving steadily inward toward the core systems where most inhabited worlds are located." Jake walked over to one of the modified control panels and stared at the alien symbols. So humanity's war with the Zephyrians was just the beginning. There's something much worse coming. Correct. However, the Forerunners did not face this threat unprepared. The station's databases contained detailed information about a device they called the Genesis Protocol. It was designed as their ultimate weapon against the Silence. Did it work? Unknown. The Forerunners were destroyed before they could complete the project. However, all the technical specifications and theoretical frameworks are stored here. With sufficient resources and time, it might be possible to finish what they started. Jake laughed bitterly. One damaged human ship and an ancient alien. Library against a force that destroyed the most advanced civilization in galactic history. Those are terrible odds. Perhaps, but you are not entirely alone, Arya said. I have detected scattered human settlements throughout this region of space, as well as several Zephyrian colonies that appear to be operating independently of their main fleet. Some of them may be willing to cooperate if they understand the true nature of the threat. Jake spent the next several hours exploring the station with Arya's guidance. The Forerunners had built their archive to last, with self-repairing systems and power sources that could run for millions of years. Room after room contained technologies that made human science look primitive by comparison. In one chamber, Jake found detailed star maps showing the current positions of the Silences advancing edge. Another room held weapons and defensive systems beyond human understanding. Most importantly, he discovered a manufacturing facility that could potentially build new ships and equipment using Forerunner designs. Arya, how long do we have before the Silence reaches the core systems? Jake asked as they returned to the ship. Based on its current rate of expansion, approximately 8 to 10 months before it reaches the first major inhabited worlds. 6 months before it enters human territory. Jake sat down heavily in his command chair. 6 months to somehow unite the scattered remnants of humanity, convince their former enemies to work together, and complete a project that had defeated the greatest civilization in galactic history. It seemed impossible, but as he looked out at the ancient technology surrounding him, Jake realized he had something the Forerunners had never possessed. He had the knowledge of their failure and the determination of a species that had already lost everything. Sometimes that was enough to change the course of history. Arya, begin downloading everything this station knows about the Genesis Protocol, he said, and start plotting courses to the nearest human settlements. We have work to do. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the end of everything he had ever known. Outside the thick glass windows, space burned with the light of dying human vessels. The alien ships looked like giant crystal daggers cutting through the darkness, each one bigger than a city block back on Earth. Their weapons fired beams of blue energy that turned human ships into clouds of glowing metal dust. Sir, we lost the Albany and the Houston, said Lieutenant Sophie Blake. From her station. Her voice shook even though she tried to sound calm. Admiral Hamilton's ship just went dark too. Jake felt his heart sink into his stomach. Greg Hamilton had been his friend for 20 years. They had trained together at the academy when Earth was still safe and the stars seemed full of promise instead of death. Now Greg was gone, along with 3,000 crew members and the last real hope for organized resistance. The Zephyrians had come from the deep space beyond human territory 3 years ago. At first, Earth's leaders thought they could negotiate, or fight them off like they had done with other hostile species. But these aliens were different. They moved like a plague across human space, taking every world and killing everyone who lived there. Their technology was far beyond anything humans had ever built. Jake had been just a captain when the war started. He commanded a small patrol ship on the Outer Rim worlds. By the time Earth fell 6 months ago, he had become a commander through the simple fact that most officers above him were dead. Now, with Hamilton gone, he was the highest-ranking human military officer left alive in the Alpha Centauri system. How many civilian ships made it through the jump gate? Jake asked. About 40 transport vessels loaded with refugees, Sophie answered. But the Zephyrians are moving to cut off their escape route. They have maybe 10 minutes before those crystal ships block the way out. Jake looked at the tactical display showing the battle. The remaining human warships were scattered and outnumbered 20-1. They had fought bravely, but brave meant nothing against overwhelming force. The aliens seemed to have unlimited ships and weapons, while every human vessel lost was irreplaceable. "Sir, incoming transmission from Captain Amy Rodriguez on the civilian convoy," said the communications officer. "She wants to know if we can buy them more time to reach the outer jump point." Jake knew what that meant. The civilians needed at least 15 minutes to reach safety, but the human fleet would be wiped out in less than 10. There was only one way to give them the time they needed, and it would cost him everything. He thought about his sister Nancy back on one of the colony worlds, if she was still alive. He thought about his nephew Billy, who would be 8 years old now, and probably hiding in some bunker while alien ships burned the sky above him. Jake had joined the military to protect people like them, and now he had one last chance to do his job. "Arya, bring up the quantum drive specifications," he said to the ship's artificial intelligence. "Commander, the experimental drive system is not designed for combat use," Arya replied in her calm female voice. "Activating it during battle conditions could create unpredictable quantum effects." "That's exactly what I'm counting on," Jake said. He turned to Sophie and the rest of his bridge crew. "I want everyone except essential personnel to get to the escape pods. Transfer command of the remaining fleet to Captain Rodriguez." Sophie stared at him. "Sir, what are you planning?" "I'm going to ram the biggest Zephyrian ship I can find while overloading our quantum drive," Jake said simply. "The explosion should disrupt their formation long enough for the civilians to escape." "Commander, that's suicide," Sophie protested. "There has to be another way," Jake shook his head. "The math doesn't lie. We can't win this fight, but we can make sure some humans survive to fight another day. That's worth more than my life or yours or anyone else's on this ship." The bridge crew looked at each other with expressions of fear and determination. They all knew he was right, even if they hated hearing it. One by one, they saluted and headed for the escape pods. Sophie was the last to leave. "It's been an honor serving with you, sir," she said. "Take care of yourself, Lieutenant," Jake replied. "Make sure the survivors remember what happened here." After the crew evacuated, Jake sat alone on the bridge with only Arya for company. He programmed a course toward the largest Zephyrian vessel, a massive crystalline ship that looked like a floating mountain. Its weapons could destroy planets, but it would never get the chance to use them on another human world. Jake pushed the ship's engines to maximum power and began the quantum drive startup sequence. Warning lights flashed red across every console, but he ignored them. Outside his windows, the Zephyrian ship grew larger and larger as he accelerated toward it. "Arya, any last words?" he asked. "It has been a privilege to serve with you, Commander Morrison," the AI said. "Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." Jake smiled grimly and activated the quantum drive just as his ship struck the alien vessel. The universe exploded into light and impossible colors, then everything went black.